Hey everybody, welcome once again to Rise of the GM. I'm here with Adam Caldwell, point the right way, and my name is Matthew Thomas. We're going to be talking about some Stolen Dishonor, Possessed Cleric, and a little bit about Adam. All that now on Rise of the GM. Hey, Adam. I was telling Adam before this podcast started, I always point where he is on my screen, and then on the playback, I always say I'm pointing the wrong way. So I got to get that figured out. But it's nice to be back with you all here today. We are excited to hear a little bit more about Adam's story. Last time we heard about my story and how that started, what kinds of things I typically do, and what my games look like, some of that stuff. We're going to hear about Adam's today. But before we get into that, we're going to do what we always do first, and that is start with an encounter starter. So we have this book of encounter starters. Again, check out Gnome Stew or Gnomecast. It's a great podcast. They wrote this book, and we're going to read one now and talk about how we might begin to put that into a campaign. This one's called Stolen Dishonor. So Adam, why don't you start us off there today?
Stolen Dishonor. This is a pretty interesting one, so I'm excited to look into this today. So it goes this way. Most of the founding members of a famous adventuring party have recently been murdered. The two survivors contact the PCs for help. The PCs arrive to find them murdered as well. Your children are next, is written on the wall in their blood. On the table next to the last two victims is a large lens with a folded note. If we are killed, use this. The lens allows one to see scenes from the locations past. Used at the murder location, it shows a figure suddenly appear in a puff of smoke, slash at the victims, and then disappear. The lens also reveals some of the conversation beforehand. Between bouts of nervous small talk, one victim says, "Do you think it was that business in the pit?" The other snaps, "Shut up. We did what we had to. You were there." It also shows the figure writing his gory message, and his face is visible. The pit is well-known as the site of the first adventure that the victims embarked on when the party was originally formed. There, 9 years ago, and the length of time promises made by demons are good for some belief systems, they defeated a demonic cult at the bottom of a dried-out well. The clues should lead the PCs there, with a few critters that have taken up residence and need to be cleared out. At the pit, the lens reveals robed cultists chanting around a demon who asks, "What do you desire and what do you offer?" The leader of the famous adventurers throws off the robes disguising him, buries an axe in the lead cultist, and bellows, "Victory! And I offer you these souls." He and the other party members begin to fight the cultists as the demon shouts, "You shall have it." Unnoticed in the fray, but visible in the lens, the injured head cultist drags himself off. The murderer is the head cultist, returned to take vengeance on the adventurers. He is trading their souls for more power. The demon has granted him a sword which allows him to teleport to a victim's side, acquire the soul with one slash, and then teleport back. His vengeance complete, the sword is now just another sword. The head cultist isn't difficult to track down and has recently formed another cult. So that's Stolen Dishonor.
Okay. A lot of stuff in this one. And, I guess I'll start by letting you kind of open up. What kinds of things would you think about if you were going to be inserting this into a campaign you had going?
Yeah. This feels very, this feels more lore oriented for me. And it's a nice thing because it's building into this idea that there are like more things going on in the world. I think sometimes we maybe you just see like what's inside that circle of your vision, as far as like a party, if you're a player, or that's the things you kind of think about, but it's nice to have that extra like depth of the world. And even like the idea of like, oh, there's like more adventuring parties than just us out there. Is kind of a cool thing. So I like that as part of that. And so I don't know, a thing I'm kind of thinking through here is like almost them knowing about these in advance, I think would be good. Like that adventuring party, even if it's just in history, that like almost a decade ago they were something big and people were talking about them, could be helpful. But I really like the kind of like investigation part of it too. And I think I'd want to play that up more. I think that's something for me more and more. I'm liking to like integrate that into games where there's not necessarily just like, oh, I'm going to jump in and hack and slash and win the day, which does happen. It looks like that is a thing that's going to happen eventually, but to be able to nose around, use those investigation rolls, use those perception checks and things like that, depending on what we're playing, and be able to do that. So I think that's a different kind of pacing for a party, and that's a cool way to kind of do just a different thing for the night. So
what you were saying about them having heard about this party before. And I think if I read this and I was thinking, okay, I might drop this into my campaign at some point, the first thing I would do is like I would plan 2 or 3 different sessions where they hear about things about this party. And the cool thing is, if I was starting a campaign and I knew this one was going to come, I would plan, hey, maybe by the time they get to level 5 or something, I don't know, whatever level I would want them to go on this, I will have made sure that they've heard about this party in several ways. And maybe even it's part of like the big history that these were like some of the first big adventurers from this area. And they're like really famous, to the point that when they're contacted, so it's two of these members contact them, and it's like, oh my goodness, that's, first name that came to mind was Wolfgar from Drist. It wouldn't be Wolfgar, but like, let's pretend, you remember the old Drist Do Erden, the black, the dark elf series. Wolfgar was one of them. And if you are like this party and all of a sudden it's like Wolfgar of this, party has sent you a message and wants to meet with you, you'd be like, what?
Yeah, right.
And that's the way it should feel for them. Oh my goodness, this is like big time. These guys are like the real deal. And maybe they've been out of it for a few years, but it sounds like it here. And so you go to meet with them, you're going to find them dead.
Yeah.
But this idea that they thought about the fact that they could be killed like the others, and so they left this lens. And so this lens as an object is something that then could be used throughout the game. You're going to use it here in this to see what happened to them, and you're going to see what happened at the bottom of the well. So they've got to think about using this lens when they get to the bottom of the well. Because I've had parties where they find this thing and it's like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to put that in my haversack. I'm going to put that in my bag of holding. And then like for the rest of the game, you're like 14 levels deep and they've never pulled it out. Or remember, they have this lens of viewing or whatever it's called. And you keep trying to like be like, what do you guys have in your backpacks anyway? You keep trying to figure out how to solve this problem. And they get to the bottom of the well and they're like, man, I don't know what in the world could have happened down here. And you're like, so somehow as a GM, you've got to be able to like, without like making it completely pointed, you've got to like remind them about this thing. And so often like before they go down into the well where they would use this again, or, here when they see it, they might pick it up and you're like, you don't know what it is. But as you turn it over in your hand, all of a sudden you see this vision through it, okay, that works. But then if they stick it in their backpack and they're going to this well, what I would typically do before going down in the well is it's like, as you start to go down into the well, you thump your backpack and one of your, pitons. We always have this debate. Those climbing things that you hammer into a wall and you use to tie yourself off. I've always wanted to call them pythons in my life. I don't know why, but then it's probably because I've always just read that word and never actually heard it. But I think it's pronounced piton. I can never say it without sounding French. Anyway, I'll say some of those spill out and maybe this lens falls out, or you look and just want to make sure you don't crack your lens or anything, somehow to remind them, oh yeah, that's like right there. And then I try not to say anything about it and hope that they make the connection. If they don't, then I've got to get even more transparent in my reminding them. But so, I mean, the cool thing is hopefully then I can begin to, in the rest of the encounter, build in places where they can use this lens. But I also have to think about they're going to use this lens in places where I haven't necessarily thought what's happened here in the
Right.
future or in the past. They're going to be in every single place. They're going to be like, we're in the tavern with, the lady who's trying to sell us, tarot cards. I want to look and see what she did last,
Right.
week. And it's like, okay. And then you have to come up with something she did last week.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But getting back to this, I like the idea that it's this adventuring party that they almost are in awe of
Yeah.
because they've heard so much about them, and then they get contacted, and then obviously this starts a whole thing, and they have to find out what's going on. I would also make that sword, the enchanted sword that he had that would allow him to teleport, slash, and then they say he teleports, slash, and then teleports away, but then he also writes this gory message. So it has to be
Right.
more like teleport, slash, quickly write a gory message about your children are next, then disappear. But I would make that sword so prominent that whoever in my party uses a sword would begin to think, that's going to be mine.
Right.
And then they get all the way to it and they get it, and it's just a normal
Mundane
sword.
storm. Yep.
And then they have to find out that it was expended. So when you come to the end of this, obviously this adventuring party went down, and they through subterfuge got in with this cult, and then they threw him off, and they're like, ha ha, we want victory, and these souls are, they basically made a deal with the demon for 9 years until that promise ran out, and now he's letting someone else make a deal with him.
Right.
But they killed these cultists. The head cultist gets away, and so they have to decide who is the big bad here. Am I going after the cultist, or am I going after the demon?
Right.
What's my end goal here? Because now this cultist, evidently he's been giving these souls of these great adventurers for more power. So in my world, that would be the greater the person, the more power is given because of it. And so this guy
Right.
that they're going to face, this cultist, is going to be pretty powerful, much more powerful than he was back when they first met him, and they just chopped him in the back.
Right.
But then there's also the whole idea of a demon, and this demon who's, passing out power and stuff. Are they going to go after that? So I have to figure out how I'm going to weave which
Right.
parts of that into my story. Do I want to have a demon as a major player in the story? That might be a cool thing for them to have to defeat later. Maybe they have to defeat the cultist now and the demon sometime later. And so I'll kind of start thinking about how I would do all of that.
Yeah. Just jumping in on that. I was kind of thinking about that part of what you do. Okay. So you get through this encounter, take care of the cultist, what you actually do with that demon. And I think, like you said, you're trying to figure out what, where is your campaign going? What's the arc looking like at that moment? Does it become a figure in that, where, I thought two different things of it becomes, like he said, one of the bigger, foes, maybe that they go against. If it doesn't fit, you could just have a scene where it, just kind of says some things to them. There's a little bit of RP there, and then it just, dissipates, and it's not to be seen again. And I think there's ways, to just there's a resolution, but it's out. I don't know. I like to throw choices, in the mix that here's it's offering deals to people. It's probably going to offer some deals to the people that just took out its lead follower, kind of thing. That's probably where I would go, unless it was just going to be way out of bounds as far as where the arc was going. And then you kind of mess with, well, I could give you a sword just like that, or something even better, kind of thing, and make your party kind of make those choices, of, oh, we're going to stand firm and be heroes, or maybe they want, to try to harness some power, or double cross the, that kind of thing. So just putting those choices in there, I think is kind of a cool thing. Last week,
here's a flip.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's a flip. And I just thought of this. What if they get to the pit and the cultist is not there? The cultist that came and did all the vengeance, they actually encounter the demon, and the demon maybe offers them choices or whatever, talks about a little bit, and you can begin to weave this. So for me, what brought this particular permutation of mind is, what if my original campaign did not have like a demony sort of big bad guy at the end,
Right.
but it was an actual man? Oh, well, what if we flip that? What if they get here and they fight the demon, and the demon's like a lower level demon who's been handing out these powers, but he talks about how he's been now for 9 years kind of granting power to this guy. And it's just that he didn't let him go after the original adventurers until, the promise to them of victory, the
Right.
9-year promise, was done. But
Okay.
this guy's been getting super, super powerful. And maybe he ends up being the big bad guy at the end. If you have like
Right.
more of a human big bad, and you already have a campaign where somebody who is kind of a magic user is going to be the bad guy, this could be part of that development. And so
Yeah.
you could flip it. Instead of defeating the cultist and then eventually going to the demon, you could do it the other way. You could defeat the demon, banish him, get rid of him for all time, whatever. But you're eventually going to end up at this guy who is like way more powerful, because for 9 years he's been garnering power more and more and more and more. And then he's gone when you get there. So that could be something too.
Yeah. Yeah. That probably spinning out too far here, but like you're making me have these, I like that, because even that could be a way of like even weakening, it's like we're moving ahead in progress with trying to take out this enemy or take them down or whatever is happening, by like, that's a power that's being taken from them. If this demon's like fueling that a little bit, kind of remove that, and that's like a weakening of this big bad that you're going to try to fight later. There could be like even stair steps into that as well. So that's interesting. I was thinking a lot about the adventuring party. And last week you mentioned, having that discussion where like PCs would come into play as like NPCs, or like flow in and out of all these campaigns, like over time with the guy that you were talking to. And I think that would be an interesting thing, and in like kind of a practical way to even bring. It kind of stinks because they all die, so maybe you don't want to do that. But like if some of these people were people you had heard about or even played, there's like a connection point there where they're able to do that, or even maybe even like important NPCs. If you don't want to kill off your old player characters, that is a thing. It's kind of a weird position to be in, but being able to connect that history of campaigns even that way, I think could be pretty neat.
Right.
Yeah. I do think the lens thing, I get a little wary of, and it's the thing you said where it's like everywhere you go, either they totally forget about it, or everywhere you go, I'm going to pull the lens out and see what happens, and I think that can be really fun to like make up things and to tell that story, but it also could get really boggy with the game, where it's like, okay,
I'm checking out every tavern owner's like last week. It's
yeah.
Who cares?
Every scene, you're trying to make. And so I don't know. This is a very different situation, but so like the game and the guys who watch this, who are part of this, are going to hear some things, but like, the game we're in right now, lycanthropy has become a thing, and it's like, man, I think it's an awesome story, but also sometimes I wish they had never fought werewolves because it's like an added element that like is kind of difficult to navigate sometimes. And like, what do you actually do with this?
You've got to remember as
you have to remember it too.
Yeah.
It's like, the moon
full
cycle
moons
is,
are passing. What's happening
kind
here?
of thing. So trying to count off days and remember those things in a realistic, semi-realistic manner, at least realistic to the world that you're in. So that lens thing, I don't know. Part of me wants to like shatter it at the end of the encounter. I don't know if that's, but
and this is a thing you think about as a GM. You think, okay, if I'm going to put this in their hands, do I want to engineer a way that it's going to like be destroyed or taken, or do I want to allow them to have it? Is it going to be limited use and burns out, or does the demon try to grab it back right at the end and crush it? How am I going to think about this going forward? And it does you good to kind of pre-think about anything powerful that enters your game, because it is better to either not give them something powerful, give them something powerful that has kind of an automatic end, But what's the worst is when they come to think of this as theirs and as something that's their own, and then you nerf it because you
Yeah,
realize this
absolutely.
is destroying everything I try to do.
Yeah.
Because then they feel like they've lost. They feel like they've been demoted, gone down a level. If it's something that they start to do all the time and then you take it away. So anytime
Right.
something powerful is out there, know that they're going to want it and they're going to want to use it all the time. So think about how that's going to actually, and sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you give them, a sword that's really powerful because you want them to be more powerful.
Yeah.
But you just have to expect they are going to be more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's a
hey,
good encounter.
that's some encounter stuff. We might come back to that a little bit at the end. We may sometimes try to tie in NPCs with encounters. We'll see. But today, last week, you got to hear from me and how I started this whole thing from my gaming experience to my game playing experience to what games I've led and on and on. And I just kind of rolled all over the place. By the way, after I talked about being killed by a bush, this is probably, how your devices are listening to you. I was on Instagram and this Instagram reel came up of a dude who comes in and it's like an RPG guy. And he's like, how was RPG playing? And the other guy's like, oh, we fought a bush for 3 hours. It killed all of us. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's like exactly my story. So maybe my story is not so original as I thought it was.
Wow.
Maybe
Yeah.
lots of people have fought a
Yeah.
bush and had total party kills. But anyway, we talked about lots of stuff that I'd done. Today, we're going to let Adam kind of share his story of how he started in gaming at all and like what kinds of stuff he's done in that realm since then. So Adam,
Take it away here. Okay.
take it away.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I was telling Matthew in this that I got a little overwhelmed thinking about the gaming like experience that I've had as I was trying to just kind of get my thoughts in order. But I have done I'd say the vast majority of my like RPG experience has been in the fantasy realm. More recently, not long-term games necessarily, but more recently I've played some things outside of that, and we'll get to that more probably as the podcast goes on and we have guests come in and talk about some other games and things like that. But again, like vast majority in the fantasy realm of a lot of Pathfinder, a lot of D&D, and some other kind of side games that also are in the fantasy realm. But I said this, in the first episode, I think, but I felt like I didn't start like early on. I was in college when I played the first RPG. I had some guys that I moved in with my sophomore year of college, and we were hanging out and like, hey, like there's this game that we play sometimes, and we were interested in starting up a campaign. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but sounds awesome. So, jumped in that first game. Danny, Matthew mentioned last week, was running that game. And then my roommate, Zach, and Danny's now wife, Brandy, the four of us were part of that for a couple years before having some more people move into that. And very first thing, rolled up an elf ranger. In this game, it's WoW, Warriors of Virtue, that was talked about last time. And I have a lot of like really fond memories of WoW. Like, I mean, obviously it's the first thing that got me into role-playing games and tabletop games. We talked about it a little bit last week, so I don't want to go into that, but it's like a 2d6 system for the most part. Everything's super simple. The GM uses a percentile dice sometimes, depending on like your skill set and things like that. But very, at least the way it was being run by Danny, who's a great storyteller, and really was blessed to have him as a first GM. Very story driven though, like very story driven.
I think both of us can say that Danny Brown was a huge influence on the way that we GM. Just because the way he GM'd and what we liked about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what really drew me in. And yeah, exactly. I feel like there's a lot modeled after that too, as far as just like influences. But yeah, just really evocative storytelling and setting the scenes and things like that. And I don't know, I can't remember where we were at with this when you jumped in, Matthew, but we started out, we had a chessboard,
Yeah.
and we had a bucket of muscle men and other random things that had been around for a long time that they had played with. And I mean, some of the greatest playing that I've experienced, and didn't have all this extra stuff and
Yeah, it's
images,
funny
and it was
because
all,
now we like 3D print anything we can think
yeah,
of,
right.
and we order these minis, and we have like a mini for every
Yep.
monster. And
Yep.
back then, yeah, when I started, I got there and they were still using a
Yeah.
64 square chessboard, which was really small.
Mhm.
And your characters would be on there, and every bad guy was just like, if you don't know what muscle men are, they're these little rubber muscly looking dudes that don't even have faces. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just like, they're very bland looking, and all of them were they pink?
Yeah, they're pink. You get them at the dollar store.
They look like an eraser almost.
Yeah.
But that was like every monster. Set that out there, and it's like there's a Hydra that's come up, and you're like, yep,
Yeah.
there he is. There's a Hydra. He looks like a muscle man. But yeah, that was good times. That was more theater of the mind, right?
Yeah, for sure, and that comes back around, I think, for me more recently. But so played this elf ranger. His name was Mintius, and I got mocked all the time.
Very minty.
Like Mintident. And he lasted 3 sessions. And then I got killed by a skeleton. I was climbing up a ladder, and the ladder got pushed over by a skeleton, and I fell like 100 feet somehow and died. So I quickly rolled up another ranger, half elf this time, because I guess that's better. And that was Josephus Whiteleaf, and that one took me all the way through my playing of WoW for like, I don't know, the next 3 years or so. Just really fell in love with playing the game, and again, that storytelling and just like the scenes and building world together that we got to do. So we did that for a long time, and somewhere in the mix, there was a moment where I was able to do that one shot playing the WoW system with a bunch of people, and that, I know I've talked about that, but it was nice to like lay out a story, to see it kind of envisioned, and then like actually see it come to fruition. And I was really like nervous and scared about that, I think, going in, but again, I had a lot of people who were really encouraging, but really, really enjoyed that it like actually went somewhere, and that it seemed like people had fun, and it was like, okay, I like facilitating fun. I like doing that for people and building this stuff together. So I kind of tucked that in the back of my brain at that time. And that was about the time also that we started shifting to like 3.5. Barry and Rob both ran some 3.5 games for us that we took part in. And that was like really, I think, where I started to seeing like a little bit more expanse of like the like mechanics of a game and options and things that you could do. Just seeing like D&D has so much obviously history and just available resources. Being able to see that and kind of broaden things out. So we played with them, and I think it was I've been trying to remember what the actual circumstances was, but I think it was just a matter of they had kind of run their games and were ready to take a break. And I'm like, I've done this one thing with WoW this one time. I'll try to jump in, and see like what this looks like. So my first campaign, immediate jump in. I don't remember ever having run anything but that one single WoW one shot, and then decided, yeah, I'm going to do this like campaign thing and just go, and
right.
Jumped in. And so that was in D&D 3.5 was that. It's I don't think I ever named that campaign. It's in the Unidia is the world, and I made a map and had these kind of ideas start flowing. Matthew was in that game. Several.
And since it was his first campaign ever, I decided to go out and buy my own books that were psionics that he had never dealt with.
Right.
And I'm going to be a psionic character, and here's all the stuff I'm going to be able to do, and I'm going to be awesome. And of course, I was.
Yeah. That was a fun one, a really fun one. Again, just kind of traveling the world and seeing that build. but I remember, and I still have this. I guess I'm someone who keeps things. I've realized because I I have a binder and I would like manuscript out every session, which I don't necessarily suggest is the word.
Right.
I don't suggest that anymore, and I understand like why I did that. But you know, I have like a binder full of like notes, which is pretty cool to go back and see. But I think the problem and the thing I learned pretty quickly with like the manuscripting thing was like as soon as a player doesn't do what you had planned, you know, it's like, well, we're off the rails and it's time to improvise anyway, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And learn pretty quickly, like, it's not that fun. I knew that as a player also. It's not that fun to just get like railroaded into whatever the GM wants you to do. You know, it's like having agency as a player is really good. So, so yeah, I ran that game and ran that to level 20. And that
Yep.
was over the course of, I think it was a little over a year, maybe close to 2 years for that one. Moved pretty fast through the levels, and really got just excited about running games, but was excited to also get back into playing. And we did several like kind of iterations of games. Matthew's game we ran, and I played in. I've had several games as we kind of shifted to Pathfinder that were like all the way to the end. I've had a few that just kind of fizzled, you know, and I think that's something that's important for people to know too, is like sometimes, you know, there's a lot of different reasons for that. Sometimes it was, I think in my experience, like I know at least one game where it was just kind of my vision wasn't there, you know, and I didn't really know where it was going. And it just kind of didn't go. It got to a certain point and then just didn't happen anymore. Sometimes it's like people move, or which is not as, I don't think is hard anymore. We can still stay in contact, you know, over
Yeah, it's a
remotely and
different
stuff.
world, isn't it?
Mhm.
Now we play online. Back in the day
Yeah.
when people moved, it was like, man, I guess we're not going to game.
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
now you can.
Yep. It's, you know, it was like a scramble, you know, when that would happen prior. And so that is a really nice thing, nice change now. But yeah. So running those, you know, moving into Pathfinder, really have enjoyed like the accessibility of Pathfinder 1, you know, is the thing that we've played in quite a bit, and probably again vast majority of my either playing or running. But somewhere along the line, after running several games and campaigns and playing in them, I don't really know. I think maybe and we mentioned Evan, our buddy Evan, and our friend Eric. Like they both were really good about like bringing in systems that like I have never heard of these, but let's try it out, kind of thing. And that's always been exciting for me too, to just like try out new mechanics and see like the different kind of stories that are told because of the way the mechanics even work, which I think will be really cool as we move forward, like having people come in and talk about different things. I think just the stories are told in a different way, where it's, you know, sometimes it's not so much about the game board or like heavy dice mechanics, but more about like what you're envisioning and those kind of things, or how you like justify what you're doing with the dice, kind of thing. So I've kind of broken into those things quite a bit too recently, particularly like Sentinels Comics RPG is a thing I've run quite a bit and played. Red Markets is a really quality game that I really enjoy running. I've actually only ever played one session of that. I died in that at the end of it,
I'd
which I
forgotten you've
actually,
only played once.
one
Yeah.
session. Yeah. Oh no, sorry, two sessions. Two sessions. My friend Ben ran a session one time too, and did a really good job of that. So yeah, two sessions ever, but I've ran a ton. And I'm actually seeing a theme, which I may be jumping the gun here, but I die a lot when I play. I'm realizing as I'm telling the story, because it's like my first character ever died after 3 sessions. That Red Markets guy died. Matthew pointed out that my bard from his game, the Oracle of Order, died twice. I feel like this is a thing. So
I'm running now died.
That's right. Cormac died. So maybe one of my player profiles, at least, is that my characters tend to not last the night. So I don't know. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I think one of the things I've come back around to a lot is like I started in that WoW game with story being such a like strong part and the mechanics being less. And I think that comes out, that was like me as a player and seeing that ran and facilitated in that way. But I think more and more for me, mechanics obviously matter. It's like mechanics are the game. It's like, how is this played kind of thing. But in situations where it's like people talk about the rule of fun, and I do believe in that, where it's like, what's like fun in this moment? Let's do that, and maybe sometimes the mechanics like can waver a little bit, but that's kind of how I approach things. So, yeah.
Here's a question for you.
Okay.
So I have a wife and children. Didn't when I first started. We started before I was married. A little different than we used to get together. I think I said last week we'd get together super early on Thursday and we'd play till Friday morning about 5 in the morning. And that was a different time. Now I have a family and that doesn't happen. So it's a little shorter. We still luckily get together once a week and we go from about 6:30 to 10:30, 11:30 around in there. Then we're done. But I know Adam, he plays with me. Where I'm going with this is I have a group. I get together one time a week with a group of guys and I keep that pretty sacred. We plan around that and we both have now for years. It's like, oh, I can't Thursday nights because Thursday nights are taken. We just know that. But Adam is even more than me, and he has other nights that he plays with other groups of guys. He has some students there at ISU that he runs a game for. He plays with some guys that used to play with us that moved, and they still get together sometime and play. And so how many games do you play, and how does that work with family?
Right.
He's like, why did you ask me this on air when my wife will hear it?
Well, currently, it would be like our Thursday night game is like every week if possible. Times we have to. There's certain times where it's like people can't make it or whatever. But and then I would say right now my only other regular game is every other Monday night. And that's like a really nice, and it's like a 2-hour block. So that really works for all of us, the 3 of us that play in that game. It's easy, especially with 3 people. You can get a lot done in 2 hours versus like a 5 or 6 kind of game. So right now that's my regular gaming. Okay. But there are a lot of, I'm blessed. I'm very blessed. I'm realizing from a gaming standpoint with a lot of opportunities. Like I probably could play 3 to 4 games with a week if I wanted to with people, but that would be not appreciated by my family and that wouldn't be a good choice by me. So just be honest. So like with family though, one, my wife is very gracious, for that to be able to happen, and knows that like she's expressed, she understands that that's like a really rejuvenating thing to like be, particularly in those groups. These are like Thursday crew and the Monday guys are close friends, and it's like time to be together. That's like really good for people. So I'm always super thankful to be able to have that and just like catch up a little bit, have fun, that kind of thing. And she's like encouraging in that to like be rejuvenated in that way. But I would say, it's probably 3 or 4 years now. I was running a regular game for a group of students here. And that was like as close to weekly as possible or every other week. I tried to flip flop it a little bit. So I wasn't gaming so much, but there were also some other students running games, and they would invite me into Cameo or things like that. And it was too much. I will be very honest that was like too much going on, too much like kind of taking time away from my family. And so at times I will say I did not juggle that well. And I think part of that is like knowing now, okay, what's actually available. I do try to like play, if I do those extra ones, it's like playing when like maybe my kids are already in bed, so I'm not missing out on time with them. If my wife is like if she's doing something else in an evening or something already, then that's a good time for me to try to plan one of those extra one shots or something like that where we're not missing. So I try to finagle the schedule that way. But yeah, that's been an ongoing process of like, okay, this is like a thing I love. It's rejuvenating, but also I need to make good, responsible choices as well. So I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah.
Well,
And you said something in there that I think is very interesting. And that is, you said, I realized I'm blessed to have had opportunity. And you and I both work with college students a lot. And so we are with a bunch of students who have more free time. They don't mind staying up late or meeting any time of night sort of thing. But I know for a lot of people, and we talk on this podcast to people who are looking to get into gaming, looking to get into GMing. Sometimes opportunities can be hard. I know my brother-in-law has been to at times in his life where he kind of wanted to be in something like this, and there just wasn't anybody around. And then he finally found a group of guys, and he felt very fortunate. And that can be true. I will say this: if you really do begin to GM, you begin to learn how to GM, and you're okay with teaching people, you can increase your opportunity manifold because you can bring people in. And even if it's just like two other guys, you can sit down and like walk through the character creation process and make it really exciting. Let them make all these choices and talk about what their character can be. And then you can begin to lead them through a game. And inevitably, one of them will have a friend who wants to come, and then you begin to build that. But there is something really special about kind of having your group, having your people that this is the one I make time for every week, even if you run a game here and there. So for those of you who don't have a lot of people around you, stick in there. It is more popular now and easier to find a game now than I think it used to be. But two, if you really kind of get into the GMing thing and you're okay with online, it's like even more easy now to find opportunities. I think you would probably agree with that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I feel like I'm in some different groups with people who there's a lot of like, hey, I'm looking for a game, or we're looking for an extra player. There are people out there that definitely are looking. And just reiterating what Matthew just said, like to the like take a step out there and grab some friends and run a game, and see what it's like.
Even if none of you know what's going on.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on together.
Right. Yeah. that's
okay.
Sometimes the most fun is just like, hey, we're going to work this out and we can fix the problems later with it.
Yeah, so you make a decision, and then next week they come back and they're like, actually, I was reading, and there is such a thing as cover. It's 50%. Right. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't know. From now on, that's going to be the rule. The first week, you're just like, oh yeah, he's behind something. Nobody can see him. He's invisible. Nobody can hit him. So
yeah, it has been super fun. Like particularly with like students I've played with, especially like back when I first started playing. With students, I've been playing forever with friends and ran some games, and it's been awesome to see several of them decide, hey, I want to run games too, and run all sorts of things and be able to play and be like, this is awesome to see just people also creating fun, and bringing people together. So that's been good.
And it's also fun helping people who are just learning to become GMs when you see that they want to. That's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. What's your favorite character that has like not gone on? So like you got into a campaign, you played 1 or 2 episodes, and then it just kind of never went. But you really love that character. Do you have anything like that?
Oh man. Oh, that's hard.
Kind
Trying
of
to
threw
think
you off
of.
guard here by asking you
That's all
like
right. That's
to
all right.
think through all these characters.
We've finished a lot of campaigns, so that's one of the reasons I'm having trouble. Is like I'm thinking of the ones that
Right.
went all the way through.
I remember in one you were a sea elf who drowned. How does that
Again,
happen? Did you drown?
no, there was a I can't remember if it was an alligator or a crocodile, but I had a run in. So
I had a run in.
also died. Yeah. So I'm telling you, this is that's my thing, I guess, is my characters die. And I think I'm reckless is the problem. For the most part, it's been a reckless issue that when I get killed, it's for that reason. So I don't sit here and ho hum the whole time. Hem haw, that's what I'm trying to say. Is I'm going to go with actually my very first D&D character that was Kruian Loreweaver, the gnome sorcerer, who had like 4 hit points. It was insane. And I don't think I died, but I think we got very nearly killed by this like living tent that we went inside. If you remember that, it was like a circus tent that attacked us. But Kruian was, I liked where he was going because my whole thing was I had like business cards I was trying to give out and make our like adventuring party popular and like known, and like nobody else in the party really cared or wanted that. But I just decided, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I had a lot of fun. I can't remember how we exactly ended that, but I was just enjoying that one a lot. I know there's other ones out there, but that was
like
one
that adventuring
would,
hook we had at the beginning. You know, if we were playing with some of those people, I would
Right.
say there was this famous adventuring party that had how do you say his name?
Kruian.
Say it again.
Kruian. Cruian.
Kruian Loreweaver
Yeah.
has contacted you because they finally got famous. Everybody knew who they were.
Yep. Yeah. That'd be awesome.
All right. Well, it's always fun. I remember just to throw in there. I remember Evan that we talked about ran a campaign once, and I like made this tremendous backstory about the Aramis Baalathon, this guy who like flew and he was a changeling and he was awesome. Only played a couple times with that actual story, and I still think of that character. I still think, oh man, he was awesome. He had so much potential. Occasionally, I think about going back to him, but
yeah.
Anyway. Oh, let's see. One last question, and then we'll go on to our NPC. Have you ever? You say you have a family. Have you ever done GMing for your kids? And what's that like?
I have. It's a lot of fun. And I would actually love to I have a lot of trains where I'm at, and you're going to hear that right now, unfortunately. But
this is just background. This gives you guys the feel that we're actually sitting,
Right. And you got to kind of railroad kids sometimes a little more than you would a, adult adventuring party maybe, but which I think is true, trying to keep on track. But so my boys particularly like to play. I actually looked up some different ways, but there's a lot of simplified like character sheets that you can find online if that's a thing you're wanting to do. I think the very first time we played, it was like strength, smarts, and speed or something like that. It was like, that's it. That's like all you're doing. I don't even think, because of where my kids were the very first time we played, as far as like addition, I think we rolled like D10s, and which is kind of fun for a kids thing also, is like there is like math involved. So it's kind of like, haha, I'm like making you do addition and you don't even know it, kind of thing. So, but anyway, it's real simple. I don't think I've ever like done prep when I've run a game, and we're talking like less than 10 times have I sat down with kids. So just everybody understands that. But it's like, I think it's a cool way to even like ask more questions and do that like world building together stuff of like, all right, as we start this game, you're in a castle. Like, what's it look like? And then they can talk into that. I think like if you're going to run games with your kids or with kids that don't expect to like go very far every time you sit down and playing, like I think there's a lot of interruptions. There's a lot of, well, what about this? And whereas like adult players are going to like listen and then respond. My kids seem to have like a lot more interest in like fashioning the story themselves, maybe. So like being able to play with that and say, okay, yeah. So it's almost like a yes and kind of situation of, okay, and also this is going on. It's like, yeah, that's great, and a lot of bouncing back and forth. So we've done that, and when I play, even where my kids are at now, we actually just rolled up actual like 5e characters recently. We've not done anything with them other than I did like a sample fight just to see what they would do with it. But I'm interested to get a little more into that. But basically a lot of improv, a lot of like working together to make the story. My boy's favorite NPC is a guy named Jimmy Kneecaps, who was a, I don't know why. Jimmy Kneecaps was a guard at the castle, and they basically adopted him to come along, and he's been like the cause of many adventures so far. So he usually gets himself into trouble, and then they fix it. So
yeah, a caution and a suggestion. If you have kids and you start to GM for them, the caution is they will constantly be asking me, hey, can it be a game night when you have nothing prepared? And they want it to be, at least my son, he loves to sit down, and this is like a 2-hour, 3-hour thing. And while I like really try to set that time aside, sometimes it can be tough in the middle of things because he wants to do it at a moment's notice, but he loves it. And the suggestion is this: when you're sitting down to like begin thinking of what's my campaign going to be, let your kids speak into that. Sometimes their imaginative minds can come up with stuff you never thought of. I sat down, I typically grab a bunch of pictures, just fantasy pictures, and I start kind of concocting a story based on these pictures, and I'll show my kids, both of them, and they're like, oh, you know what should happen here? This should be this. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe. And I'm thinking no, but sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea that my kids have come up with that have made it into games that my guy that I play on Thursdays. And they end up being some of the good ones sometimes. So do involve your kids in that. Let them be part of it. It'll foster in them a love of fantasy and a love of kind of creation and storytelling. And I think all that's good, but they can also help you. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's cool.
All right. Well, hey, let's do, every week we try to do an NPC that you can grab at a moment's notice and drop in. And so we're going to look at our NPC for this week. I'm going to read this one, and let me think here. What we got? The possessed cleric. Okay, so possessed cleric. How would you say that name? Arisa Darley? Sure. Since I'm the GM, I can call it however I want. Arisa Darley. And so here's the story. Appearance: she's a hard-fighting woman with traces of curves, shoulders that confidently bear plate armor, eyes of chocolate brown. Her hands are scarred white where she once wrestled a great evil. And you don't know what that is. When you're role-playing her, know that this character would have pauses and hesitations in her speech as the dark power ransacks her memory, straining to keep up this veneer of humility and charity. Okay, so you're going to find out what this dark power is here in just a second. Personality: by day, this dark power that's within her, this is the possessed cleric, this dark power that's within her pretends to be Arissa of old, serving the town's poor districts, helping people who are in need, that sort of thing. But while it's doing it, it's selecting its prey. And when unobserved, it preys on the weak and helpless, leaving a trail of bodies and magically breaching the walls of Arissa's heart where it's bound. So what we've got here is there's this this thing inside her that pretends to be her, but really it is this dark power that is selecting and killing people. Motivation, though Arisa is well known as a healer, and still praised in several popular songs, the dark power that's cloaked in her reputation is building a conspiracy within her church. So there's some greater thing going on in the church that she's part of. And here's the background. Arisa was part of a famed adventuring company that fought its way into the deepest strongholds of evil. And in their last adventure, they opened a doorway, releasing a terrible power that blighted several kingdoms. So this was bad. Her companions fell one by one. And as that happened, she called upon her God and reached out to imprison it, knowing there was going to be a terrible cost because of that. The dark power dissolved in the shadows and went into her skin, binding itself to her, and became imprisoned within her flesh. Her eyes darkened at that time as her mind was swallowed. So you have this character here, and it's funny. Some of these characters, like often when I'm reaching for an NPC quickly, I reach for one that's just more of a, who can be a flavor of a spoiled noble, oh, okay, here's something. These that we've picked here the last 2 or 3 times, they're ones that very much want to prompt a whole encounter. They want to be a hook for something. And so when playing this character, you might begin to let some of this come out, and it would then influence the flow of your story. If you're just looking for a character, you would have to keep in mind all of this has happened, and maybe the PCs don't follow this trail till its end. But here's a character that is known for goodness, actually had a really good heart, and is actually an embodiment of evil that is killing helpless people when no one's looking. And so how do you play that into a campaign? What would you do, Adam?
Yeah. I wonder, especially first off, like even just if you're just trying to grab, like, you need a cleric. You could take some of these pieces and like forget the rest, kind of thing. Just
Right.
like, okay, like this is like the face value part for her, is this like hard fighting woman with traces of curves, shoulder that confidently bear plate armor, eyes of chocolate brown, scarred hands. Like, okay, that's my person, and I'm gonna work with that. So like there is
and maybe you could even take this. There seems to be this darkness about her, and you don't say that, but like somehow you play it as the characters are interacting with her, that there's like this, I help the poor and all this, but at the same time, they catch glimpses of her like sidelong glancing at them, or maybe they think they saw her out around where some murders happened, and she's like, no, I was out, I try to heal people on the street who need it. It's like they're trying to add this all up, but maybe it never comes out.
Yeah. I like that. I feel like this is a thing I keep saying, but I like the slow burn on this too, where it's an ongoing, things are just not feeling right more and more. I think it talks about the language, the way that she speaks, because the power inside of her is trying to like maintain this situation where it's like acting like her. It's kind of halting is the way it's talking. And like, I feel like that's going to be that could be an initial like trigger of like, something's not quite right here for the PCs to see. I tend to lean into that. I think when, like if I'm playing and like a character has like a different, maybe, I don't know if cadence is the right word of speech, but that kind of thing where it's not just a normal, it's like, okay, I don't know if the GM's meaning this or not, but this feels something's going on deeper here, kind of thing. And I think that could even cause, I like that aspect of what they're saying here with the NPC. But even like, talks about the motivation, her being well known as a healer. It's interesting to me because it's like, it's a dark power that's puppeting her. Like, how has that been working? And I think that's some like holes, even like they get punched for the PCs to start wondering like, okay, this is supposed to be a healing situation, but it doesn't quite add up either because, we know maybe that dark power doesn't actually have healing abilities. Is it illusion? Is it using some other kind of thing to, heal them? And that starts to fall through too, where it could be a clue for them too. So, but I like just like longer term getting to know her, and then things beginning to snowball into this, like something is not right and we need to figure that out. Do you have a specific kind of way you were kind of looking at it?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And this is, here's something important to realize as a GM. Sometimes you'll read these and they click with you and you like have ideas, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And
right.
so with this one, I read this and I'm like, oh, okay, that's a person. It doesn't click with me a whole lot. Like I get no flash of this is who this person would be.
Yeah.
But I do like that idea of a dark power kind of puppeting and pretending to be this healer. And so I might try to weave that into the game, that part. And it would probably be more the role of someone who like claims to be a healer, but always tends to want to be more private in the way they go off into the city to heal people. And so it's like, if you ever really dig into it, you find out there's no healing going on. As a matter of fact, these dead bodies are starting to kind of pop up, and we notice it's the same places that she's been. Right. But like the dark power is trying not to be discovered. And so, I would probably just play it pretty straight that way. No voice stuff comes to mind for this for me. Yeah. So
yeah, this is a twist on this. It's kind of throwing the majority out, but I almost like the idea. I love the idea of the sacrifice that's made, and that she made, like the actual NPC made in this history. It's like, okay, either the world's going to burn because this thing is out, or I'm going to sacrifice myself and take it into me. I'm giving myself up, but it can't be as powerful if it's just bound inside of this body than it would be. Like, and I think that's a really intriguing thing to throw in front of a party,
I think it becomes more intriguing if you have somebody who like has insight or like auras, and they would probably sense the truth of this woman is like saint, sacrificial, caring to the point of, but at the same time, there's this darkness. And so their readings would be like a Geiger counter going crazy because they couldn't it can't, it's showing both. It's showing like really good, really bad. So whether that was flickering or changing or just never could get a reading, that would be fun.
Yeah. So that gets interesting for me to think in those terms for sure. Yeah.
Right. Well, listen, interesting character, but I want to spend some time on our questions because we did have some people comment and question in our haversack this week. We appreciate you guys listening and kind of giving your insights and some comments and some questions. And so we're going to try to jump into a few of those before we end here today. Adam, why don't you bring up the first one of those?
All right. So we have 4 questions today. We'll try to get through. Thank you for those that wrote in. This is our first one. There's a little bit more than what's showing on the screen there, though. So, sorry, just double checking here. So the first one being, a campaign I'm playing in will come to a close soon, and I'm thinking of volunteering for the GM chair afterward. What advice would you give on running a session 0 so that the players and GM can agree on a mutually interesting campaign premise and set up an in-fiction reason for 4 weird characters to band together on a possibly lethal adventure? And this is a question from Evan B. He's got 3 of these questions today.
Okay.
So what advice?
So I'll start off with a couple different ways. 3 different ways that I've done it. The first way, and probably the way everybody has at some point done it in their career, is four guys meet in a tavern. That's probably the least interesting, but it's probably the most used. You guys all end up in a tavern and you're together. And so there's very little like, and the people playing it just have to start kind of trying to bring themselves together. It can be hard. Not typically my favorite, but I've had some good experiences with four guys meet in a tavern. And I've had some that were very stilted and hard to get into from that perspective as well. So that's one way I've done it. Second way I've done it is, so in the campaign I'm doing now, Oracle of Order, I took one of these encounter starters. I think there was an encounter starter about like your friend, one of the guys in the party, their friend wrote him a letter because they're being falsely accused of murdering someone, and because they were found in the woods with these two dead bodies around them, and they were like unconscious, and so they were being brought in. And I kind of built around that like an initial, and to do that, I had them all like write a little backstory, and they all did that, and I took those backstories before I started the campaign, and in that, Adam's character actually was the one who had the friend who was being falsely accused, Trayvon, and a couple of the others talked about like they had grown up in the Glithmere Forest, but they had joined in this militia, a city militia, and so part of the way I engineered this was there was going to be a trial, and this friend wrote Adam's character to say, "Hey, if I need help because on this day there's going to be a trial and I know I'm going to be sentenced to death because of this." These two militia were asked to come into town because every outlying village, in order to have something conform to the king's law, had to be witnessed by two militia. And so they had to come to this courtroom and bear witness to this as it unfolded in the courtroom. And I think there was someone else, I forget how I got them in, but I engineered this situation where they were all going to be in the same place at the same time, maybe for different reasons, but as they were there, they would get caught up in this. Okay, so that was the way I did that one. The third way, and a way that I've done maybe somewhat more successfully sometimes than others, I had this chart, and you know what? I should have had it here today as I'm talking about it. But I had this chart, and they would roll dice, and they would roll two different numbers. And based on those numbers, they would have an interaction with another person. So the person to their right, like, so say Adam's character is sitting to the right of Evan's character, and Evan's character rolls this, and it's like, you know, a secret about the person on your right. And so they would have to like kind of decide what is that secret together, and they wouldn't tell anybody else in the party. But each one of them would have a couple different relationships that they would roll up based on this chart. And I should try and find that chart and maybe put it somewhere in a show notes or on a website or something where you guys can find it sometime. But it had like basically tons of different scenarios. And do you remember any of those scenarios off the top of your head besides the secret?
I'm just
'Cause I
remembering
remember
the
that
one I
was
had.
one of them,
Yeah,
that you had.
yeah, it was the other person knew my secret, so I wanted to keep close to them, kind of thing.
And that secret ended up being that these orcs came in and like killed his family, and he went like nuts and just destroyed like tons of orcs, I guess.
Yeah, it was kind of the
And
initial rage of my barbarian kind of thing.
and this person saw all that happen, so he knows the secret of his family being lost and like the just intense rage that like opened up that he'd never experienced before.
Yeah.
And so him knowing that this other character witnessed that, he kind of stays close to that character because of that. And so there were lots of situations, and rolling up those two relationships. So every character at the table has two things they know about another, a thing they know about this one character and a thing they know about another character. So they know two pieces of information, but they don't know everybody, you know, something about everybody. And then you let those things begin to play out as they go, and that can bring the party together. those are just three rough ideas. What about you, Adam?
Yeah. Looking into the session zero really fast. I think like just like straightforward communication and like a lot of fun, just like idea brainstorming is really good in that. Especially, it depends, I guess, on what you're bringing to the table too. You may have an idea that you're already kind of moving into, and that can kind of narrow that. Maybe you're coming in and it's like, what do we want to do? Do we want this to be like a epic thing? Do we want it to be more street level, episodic? Like, I think those things are good to talk through, especially if
Right.
it's maybe like a new group or you're trying just something different, and you don't necessarily know what people have fun doing. Those are good things to ask. So I think even talking, through about those kind of things of like, what's the scope of this as far as the level of epicness. I think it's worth talking about even like how long are we thinking about this? Is it a lot of times for our games on our regular gaming time? I don't think we talk about that so much because we're just kind of in it. It's like this is a thing that's happening. So if it lasts 3 years, great, kind of thing. But I think there have been times where specifically with like the Sentinels Comics RPG, I think I was like, hey, I've got like a 6, they call them issues instead of like session, but it's like a 6-issue arc that I want to run with you guys, kind of thing. And we knew that game was going to go 6 issues. That may have been more sessions than that, but because we didn't quite get through an issue or something, but we knew there was kind of a time limit on that. So
Right.
I think that's important to set those kind of parameters too. Obviously, coming in and knowing what you're going to play as far as system, or maybe that's the thing you're going to talk through too. Just having all those things clarified as far as what do we want this to look like. And I think in that you could even say, what are some ideas about why we're together? I think within that session zero, having those conversations, that might be seen people do the like, well, we're family, like me and her are like brother and sister, or that kind of thing. And so there's a connection there between two characters, or like, well, I think I've seen people do like I'm almost like a servant or a person who works for somebody. That may be the like Sam Gamgee following Frodo to Mordor. He's this gardener, kind of thing where it's like we're tied together that way. That's like why we know each other. Or maybe we just like worked together or traveled together or did this one job way back when. I think people can talk out that kind of thing. And if they don't have them, I really do like the like rolling on tables, and those things are available too. If it's like, I don't really know, but I want to be connected. Here's some ideas, to maybe spark some just like connection points for them.
Yeah.
So that's like, go ahead.
And to throw out like one more, and this is actually one Evan did. Evan, who is asking the question, the one where I was Artemis Baelathon. I remember he said, and I can't remember this because it's been a while, so I can't remember this exactly. But like basically, they were going to be starting a new, what do you call it, cohort, a new training group of
Yeah.
initiates into the whatever this is, some organization that's going to be trying to
Right.
police or solve problems because they've been having, I don't know if it was magical problems or attacks, whatever. And so he's like, okay, your character, wherever he is, whatever he's doing, right, why he would be coming to this or how he would be coming to this. And so, you kind of write a little backstory about why it is you're going to this academy. I think it was the academy. And so we all kind of wrote this story about like how we found out about it, why we decided to go to this academy. And then we all kind of met at the academy, but we also all read everybody's backstories.
Right.
And so as you get to the academy, you kind of know a little bit about these people, and then you're thrown together, and it's more than just like, here's somebody you don't know and no story has been told yet. So
Yeah.
that can be nice.
Yeah. That's a similar, so the Jade Masks game, that's like what we're running on Thursday nights right now, what I'm running on Thursday nights. They're just initially part of a thieves guild. So the group kind of just had, like, they got given orders. Hey, this is your thing you have to do as part of this guild. And so that was a connecting point. Like, organization, I think being together in an organization is a good way to bond people together right away. Though I will say there have been moments where the group, like, legitimately the characters are like, is there a reason we're together? Like, those things are being asked, and they have to kind of figure out, like, what are our bonds? I'm not going to veer too much into that today, but I think there is a question and a thing worth talking about of, like, what happens when it's time that a character walks away. Like, I think that's a reasonable thing. For a long time I was like, how could you possibly do that? But it's like, there may be a point where the character's like, I don't have a bond anymore, or I need to go do this thing that nobody else cares about. Right. And but that's probably another conversation. I really like starting with action in a, maybe not like, hello, thank you for playing, roll initiative, which is a cool way to do it.
That's a great way to start.
But there being some sort of, like, I'm going to use the tavern illustration too. They're all in a tavern for whatever reason, resting at the end of the day, and somebody runs in. They're like, goblins are attacking, or a dragon's coming, or a beholder just erupted out of the earth, like, whatever that is. And, well, we seem to be here for a reason, and everybody jumps up and, fights, but not just a point of action, but maybe then at the end of that, I can't think right now about what this would be, but there's something that's a hook of, you all dealt with this, and now there's this responsibility that's been put in your lap. Like, the dragon had some relic that needs to be taken back somewhere, and now you all have to deal with this because you've handled it, kind of thing. And that may even play into one I've seen a lot where, and I enjoy playing and running, is like, you're the chosen people, kind of thing of, for whatever reason, maybe there's a prophecy, maybe you've been blessed by somebody, like, for whatever reason, there's something unique about all of you, and you just so happen to be in the same spot. You have a bond that means that there's, like, a destiny there, and yeah. I like that a lot too. So I don't know, those are some ideas that just kind of came to my mind.
We'll touch more on this kind of stuff, probably a lot, as we head forward. Yeah. Let's go on to our next question.
All right. So this is again from Evan B. He says, when it comes to battles, do you prefer counting squares or using theater of the mind? Or if you like a mix, when would you use one over the other?
So when we first started playing, there was more theater of the mind back when we both first started playing. I would have to say I probably right now enjoy the counting squares. And here's why. When I am given, as a character, given the freedom to do theater of the mind, I do the most amazing things that are almost impossible every time. And so it's like that idea that creativity is greater sometimes when you have boundaries. Right. Knowing that I can only move this amount of space, or, setting up my strategy, it can sometimes be frustrating, but my mind then isn't constantly wondering, well, how far can I push that envelope of, I fly up, grab a chandelier, swing around, hit with this, and then kick that guy as I fly down and cast a spell. Okay, you're doing way too much. You got to slow down there, Matthew. I do like the theater of the mind, but it gets easier for me to want to, like, kind of expand and push. And so sometimes there's, like, a comfort within, like, okay, I can move, I can do an action, I can do a bonus action. And although I hate it and I want more actions and I want more bonus actions, at least I know I've got these parameters. So what can I do in that? And then I, like, kind of settle into that groove. So as a player, And often as a GM, it helps to rein in characters who are way too fantastic. You're like, okay, hey, you only have one action here. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have three actions. You
Yeah.
can't do that because
Right.
otherwise I would, yeah.
I really, for me, it depends on system at this point.
That's true.
Like I'm in the same way. If we're talking D&D, we're talking Pathfinder, those kind of games, Starfinder. I'm gonna be pretty tied to the board as far as movement, and reason being, I love theater of the mind. So for theater of the mind, games like Red Markets or Sentinels Comics RPG, which I keep naming these off, Upwind, things like that. Those are really nice to like. You don't really need a tabletop. You can, and sometimes I'll make maps that I just draw, so you can just get an idea. But like those are built to be a little more like in your brain and
Right.
in your creativity, to think through. But for the like D&D, Pathfinder, I like the board. You don't have to, and obviously, like originally D&D wasn't that wasn't part of it. That's something that got brought in to help like facilitate the game. But the reason I like it is one, like Matthew's talked about, you like to be mobile, and you're gonna either have picked a character purposefully for that, you're gonna have taken feats to do that, you're gonna have curated your like character leveling to make that happen. You're gonna have spent in-game gold on items that allow you to do that, and I think I want to like I like the board and the actual distances, because if you take that away, then maybe that loses some of the efforts that like someone's put into a character. So that's
Right.
like a reasoning for me as far as thinking in terms of like staying with squares. Totally depends on the system, but I want to like encourage people, if they're like, I want to do all these things to get mobile so I can move, I don't 18 squares instead of 6, kind of thing. Like in one round, the rogue using a bonus action to dash and 5e, like that kind of thing. They're going to see that, and it's going to be like a cool part of their character to be able to move. So that's kind of where I would come from in
Yeah.
that. Yeah. The next question, this is Evan's last question. And there's a little bit more than what's showing on the screen. It says, great discussion on dice fudging in episode 2. If a threat to the PCs is massively more or less dangerous than expected, a GM can also get creative with the fiction to adjust the difficulty. A monster hits a PC so hard it becomes off balance for a round. The PCs hear enemy reinforcements approaching fast. Have you done any similar in-session difficulty tweaks to good effect? Thanks in advance, Evan B. So tweaking kind of, yeah.
Definitely done the one where if they're just whooping these three guys way too fast, other guys come.
Yeah,
and,
right.
and so it ups that difficulty, not because these monsters got tougher, but because suddenly there's more, or there's a
Right.
greater scope than they expected. I've definitely done stuff like that.
Yeah. I think bringing more combatants into the battle. I do think, I don't remember if we talked about this, but I'm not against like adding HP if needed to something, like I'd be honest about that. If it's like dying just super fast, but or something unexpected to happen to it. But I don't know if this is exactly the question, but even like the off balance thing, that's the thing I like to do, even like with criticals, is not just double damage, kind of thing, but trying to, and I don't do that always great. Sometimes it's just like, well, that's what happens. But some of those games I've been mentioning have that as a mechanic, even where it's like, no, something actually happens other than just double damage. And I think that's taught me to bring that into the more fantasy games as much as I can, where it's like, oh, you critical them, you do double damage or double dice damage, but they also fall down, or they they're shaken for a round, or they're afraid of you because you just like massively hit. I like bringing that in, but it's a matter of remembering in the middle of everything that happens. So
yeah, what you have to be careful of, this is my one caution, is as a GM, don't get too dependent on stuff like that. For you've got really powerful characters and you're tired of them like always hitting everybody. So
yeah,
suddenly, every time this one guy walks in who's super powerful, he gets petrified, and then he
right.
stands there unable to do anything. That's like not fun for the
Yes,
for
yes.
the character. But I think doing something where you can tell a good story. He gets hit so hard he flies off of something and hits something on the way
Right.
down, which causes a cascade of rocks that he's pinned under for a round. That's more interesting than you're petrified for a round. And this
Right.
guy's like, again, you're doing
Yeah.
that to me
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah.
I had a character once who just seems like every time he turned around, he was getting petrified. It's like, come on. It's the only thing I can't get out of.
Yeah.
And you seem to know that as the GM. And I
Right.
know
Yeah,
you know that. And I
yeah.
feel it. And then, yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to like handicap a player for being awesome, kind of thing. Like that's a thing like you definitely don't want to do. And I like bringing in the game that we're playing now, like Matthew's character can fly, and it's like, I need to make sure there's times where people can go against flying characters to good effect, kind of thing. But I don't want to like constantly, paralyze him or put him into like 3-foot tunnels that he can't, like
But
that's not good.
sometimes.
But sometimes that is going to happen, and there's moments where there are people who can shoot ranged things, but there are also moments where they can't, and he can get out of range. And I don't want to, in that case or other cases, it's like, you don't want to just like constantly dog on people for their good things, and take that away from them. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Got one more question.
One more.
And I'm going to just apologize once again. Wataya Hotel 98. I butchered your name last time, but we have another one from Wataya Hotel 98. He says, I'll bring it up here. I'll keep it short and sweet. How do you encourage a player who's new to RPGs to role play? It's never good to be forceful, but it's always rewarding to see them fully and finally get into their character. Thanks, guys. Sincerely, Wataya Hotel 98. So helping role play.
I think with role playing, it's often a case of you feel like the first time you do it, you feel like, oh man, that was so stupid. You start to do it, you extend yourself, and then you immediately feel like self-conscious. And so like any way you can break down that self-conscious. And I found one of the best ways for me as a GM to break down that self-conscious is to be the goofiest, stupidest looking person at the table. And so if I'm like, one thing that I will do if I'm trying to get somebody to role play is I will talk in character to them and only respond if they're talking back to me. So say I'm the old hag and they're like, I want to ask the old hag, like when she first noticed that the tree was filled with maggots or something, I'd be like, what's that? You want to know about the maggots? What about them? And then I just sit there and look at them. And they're like, well, when did you first know? What's that? When did I first notice? Well, you seem to be up in somebody else's business, and I'll just go on talking to him like this, and I just look right at him while I'm talking, and then pretty soon it's like they realize if they're going to get my reaction, they've got to like talk to me, and that kind of puts them in, even though they may still just be using their own voice. But like, yeah, it's hard to like when somebody, not everybody's going to do it, but when somebody can get into a role and then also not want to like take over the whole gaming session, that's good times. When you got somebody who, on the other hand, is like constantly the only one and they're always in character and you're like, okay, I need to hear from the quiet people too. That becomes its own sort of problem. Yeah. But that's not what you ask. You ask, how do you encourage a player who's new to get into that role playing? Adam, what do you do?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point of sometimes people ask like that, a question and it's not direct. It's like kind of to the side meta kind of thing and bringing that back. Or I feel like I ask a lot, like, well, do you ask that? Like that kind of thing of basically what you're doing, but it's kind of a different tact to get them to do that. I was thinking about kind of a different aspect of it, and it's like combat, which I know role play probably is more social for this question, but I like to ask, like, what does that look like as you do that? That's a thing that kind of comes up for me a lot, because I do think sometimes it's just the fatigue of a long battle. It's like, maybe I think even as a GM, sometimes I start losing the like, oh, he jumps up on the table and swings off the chandelier and then slices down at you. Does a 15 hit? Like that kind of thing. And then I get tired and I stop paying attention as much. It's like, does a 15 hit? And so I need to keep that as a GM.
Right.
Remember to keep that level up as far as like the action part of the role playing. But I do like to ask that too. I think like Matt Mercer on Critical Role, a lot of times he does like at the end of a battle that's like important. He asks how do you want to do this? Like, that's the question he asks. And it's like to kind of end the battle, allowing like that player who just did like the killing blow to like kind of narrate that in some cool ways. And I like to bring that in different moments, especially if maybe a player is kind of in that mode of like, does a 15 hit, ideal 17 damage. It's like, well, what does that look like as you do that? And then they get a chance to narrate that. And I think that helps. As far as socially, I don't know if I have much to add other than like what you said, Matthew, but like encouraging it by doing it and talking to them in character, or even if it's somebody who's like learning, being able to ask like, well, how does Ragnar approach that? And then the kind of facilitating them kind of bringing that up is kind of how I would go with it, I think, to kind of add to what you were saying.
Yeah. There's probably more ways than this, and we'll probably think of them later. And then on later episodes, we'll be like, hey, here's another way that you can get people to be involved there. All right. Well, I think that's it for us today. We do really appreciate your questions, and do remember you can drop comments and questions, stuff for us to kind of talk about in riseofthegm@gmail.com, at riseofthegm on Instagram, and riseofthegm on Twitter or X or whatever. We do appreciate you doing that stuff and watching here on YouTube while we're live streaming, and even watching that later. So that's going to be it for us today. And we're going to be back next time, and we're going to be talking about what role does the game master play. Lots of hats, lots of roles. Tune in next time to find out what those are on Rise of the GM.